Painting with style. Let's learn about how to use brushes, layer styles, and patterns in Adobe Photoshop. With any brush tool, you can choose different brushes from the supplied libraries. Go to Windows, Brushes, or press F5 and then click on the Brushes button. The brushes are organized in folders. You can click on the arrow to open the folder and see previews of the brushes. If you know the name of the brush, you can type it in the Search Brushes field. So I'll go to Window and Brushes, and we'll take a look at a few of the brushes we have available. Starting off with, in the General Brushes category, Soft Round. And this is pretty small, so I'm going to use the closing bracket key to increase the size. I'll press that a few times. And then we'll just paint with that. And you'll notice that it has, on the sides, it fades out to the background. Let's switch to the hard round and compare these. Now with the hard round, it actually looks larger. Our brush is larger. But in fact, I didn't change the size of the brush at all. It's just because the soft round brush, the edges of the brush are faded out. So that's why it doesn't take up the same amount of visual space. So it fades into the background by the time you get to the edge of the brush. So those are the two kind of basic brushes that we have in Photoshop. We're not limited to those. We have lots of options, and you can actually download and install additional brushes. But Photoshop has some installed, and we might as well try a few of them. So here's the Tile Ultimate Pencil Hard. And it resets the brush to a smaller size, so we'll once again use the brackets and make that larger. And you see it's doing something different than just putting down black. It's actually putting down gray, shades of gray, so shades of this color. So it's not just a pure black line. And as I go over it, you can see that the edges are not just purely like a smooth fade. It's because this brush is a unique shape. And if we choose one of the other brushes, you'll see that this brush has an even different shape as well. To change anything other than the size and hardness of a brush, you'll need to open the Brush Settings panel. Go to Windows, Brush Settings, or simply press F5. There are different categories of settings you can change. As you can see, there are a lot of options. But not every brush has to use every option. That would be actually a little weird. Let's look at a few settings for brushes and see how they change how the brush works. So let's start with a soft brush and make some changes. So here's our default. And then I'll just go to Window and Brush Settings. And let's look at a few things. Obviously, we can change from a soft or a hard here. So we'll say with soft and make some changes. It doesn't have to be a perfectly circle. We could make it like that, which gives us an oval. A little too fine. Let's do that a bit. And then maybe we'll make this harder. So a harder edge there. And you'll see this kind of steepling on the edges there. We can get rid of that or minimize it by changing the spacing. So if you increase the spacing, it's going to give you more of that dippling. If you increase it, it'll give you much less. So when you're working with a very hard brush, you probably want to have less spacing because that gives you a smoother effect. Let's try color dynamics. So turn off scattering. I just accidentally clicked that. So first we'll have to choose a color. So I will go into here, choose a nice teal, and then as we paint, obviously we get teal. All right, now how about if every time we paint, it's going to have a slightly different hue. So now we'll paint on top of that. And even though I haven't changed the color by going over here and picking a color, it's slightly altering the hue that we're painting with each time. We can do the same thing with saturation. So I'll turn hue back down. It's a little harder to see. How about brightness? And then we'll take that up. So, oh yes, very different each time. So you can go as wild as you want on these, or you can be just moderately different. So this will give you more variety in your brush strokes. Maybe if we just do like 2% or 3%, let's see how that changes it. So we can see just very modest changes each time. I kind of like having more of a hue jitter. That's kind of interesting. All right. So wet edges basically just means it's not fully opaque when you paint. And so if you paint over it again, it will just add on the color. So that's what wet edges does. And that's just a binary. So you just turn it on or off. And once you have a brush that you like, you can save it. In the brush settings panel, just click the plus at the bottom and it'll prompt you for a name. And we can call it Marty's Teal brush. And then we'll make sure to include the color and press OK. Since I last had my dry media brushes open when we created this brush, it actually went in the dry media brushes section. So we'd like to have this organized a little better. So why don't I create a folder just for my brushes? So I'll create a folder. Then we'll call this Marty. And then I'll drag it to the bottom, so it's just by itself. And I'm gonna drag my brush into my folder. So it'll be easy to access. And if I lose it again, all I can do is just type in what I remember the name of it was, and there it is, it appears. And I know that it's in the Marty folder, Marty Teal's brush. There are two primary ways of working with layer styles. One is by opening the panel and going to Window, Styles. This is how you can access some presets. If you click on one of them, the style will be applied to the active layer in the Layers panel. Once again, there are folders and a search bar for finding the preset you want. So to apply a layer style, well, first you have to have a layer selected. So click on a layer. This is a little tiger that we have, and let's make him look more tigerish. So I'll go to Window and Styles, and then we'll go through some of the basics are none, or you can have a drop shadow. Those are kind of boring. Here's some natural ones. Let's give them a nice graying effect, or bark. But let's see. Well, how about fur? Okay, fur. Now we're getting closer. Okay, not exactly a tiger, but a cheetah. Okay, now he's a cheetah. Perfect. That's exactly what we were going for. You may want to create or edit the layer style yourself. You can do this by double-clicking on a blank area of the layer in the Layers panel. This will bring up the Layer Style dialog box. So I'll double-click in this blank area on the layers. And these are all the effects that make this effect on that layer. So we have a bevel, we have a contour, we have a stroke, shadow, glow, color overlay, pattern overlay, and a drop shadow. So if we go back to styles, you can also access all the styles from here as well. Let's change that back to none. So we just have a blank style now. So we're back to just our basic black. And then let's apply a color overlay, and we'll change the color here. We'll pick orange. I'll hit OK. And then let's give them a bit of an inner glow. I think I actually want inner shadow. That's what I was actually wanting. Okay. And then we'll change the distance and increase the size. And then let's add a stroke. And it's very tiny, so we'll make it bigger. And it's going into this inner shadow, so we'll change the position from inside to outside. Alrighty, so that's looking like how I want. Oh, and we can change the color of the stroke if we want. Now, if you like a style and you'd like to apply the same style to other layers, you can save it. So I'll click on New Style, and then we'll call this Marty's Tiger. and then press OK. And you'll notice it appears here in our little list. Patterns are just like brushes and layer styles. You can open, browse, and search from the panel. And in the Patterns panel, pressing the plus icon will create a new pattern based on the open Photoshop file. A few weeks ago, we created a custom pattern by extracting it from a photo. We used the Extract from Image option under the plus icon in the Libraries panel. Let's try making our own pattern the old-fashioned way. Here are the steps. It looks complicated, but once we go through these together, I'm sure it will be very simple. Basically, we're going to create a square, put an image on it, and then do something special. So let's go through those steps together. So we'll create a new file, and I'll go to Photo, Default Photoshop Size, and we'll make some changes. First, make sure we're in pixels, and we'll change the width and the height to 128. You can change the resolution to 72. And then let's pick a color. So I go to background contents, where we can choose white, black, background color, transparent, or custom. We're doing custom. And then that brings up the color picker for us here. I'll choose like a light blue. Alrighty. And then just hit create. Now to make this bigger, I'm pressing Command 0 or Control 0 on Windows. And then we'll switch to the Finder and let's find something that we can use. Yeah, how about a plum? All right, so we'll put that in there. And it makes it as big as the canvas as it can be, and then we can resize it down. So I'm going to hold down Option on the Mac, or Alt on the PC, and that actually resizes it from the center. And it's actually centered based on the entire object rather than where the fruit is. But I think that should be okay. So it's just centered, and we'll just leave it like that. So I'll hit check mark. And then what we'll do is we're going to duplicate this, jump it to a new layer. So Command J. And then for this, we're going to apply a filter to it. So we go to Filter, Other, Offset, and we want to offset by half of the total height and width, which is 128. So 128 divided by 2 is 64. And I already have those numbers in there. And then the only other setting to change is we want this to be wrap around. So that's like old school video games where you go off the screen and then you come back on the screen in the opposite direction. So that's what that wraparound allows us to do. And then just hit OK. And then we have our pattern. So I'll just click on the plus icon in the Patterns panel, and then I'll add it to our patterns. So this is a plum pattern. I guess it's obvious that it's a pattern. And let's see what that looks like. So we'll create a new document in Photoshop. Once again, we'll default Photoshop size, but we won't change any of the settings this time. And then I'm going to my little yin and yang down here in the layers panel, and then choose pattern. And then it defaults to this pattern, but we want the one that we just created. So there we go. Oh, that looks pretty good. Alrighty. Now, once we have this, we can actually make additional changes to us. So we could go back to our original pattern and make a few changes and then save it as a new pattern. So for this one, I'm going to make the center one a little larger. So I'm holding down Alt or Option, and we'll just increase the size of that. And since it's a smart object, we have more detail we can work with when we enlarge it. So there we go. And then I'll hit the confirm. And then let's make a new pattern. And then plum 2. And it just puts it right next to the one that we created before. So let's go back to our other Photoshop file and let's change the pattern. So double click on that, and then we can switch. There you go. And so we have an iteration on these two patterns here.